Well, before we get on to that, let's look at the alternative of doing nothing. Nobody, as far as I can see, has attempted to put a figure on the cost of water supply failure. What does it really cost the community and business and all of us as consumers when we don't get adequate water? It is not generally realised the ACT government plans a deliberate reduction in water use per person of 25% over the next 20 years. This comes on top of a 20% fall in per capita consumption since 1992 when they started ramping up the prices. So you're looking at a cut of nearly a half in what is expected for normal household usage. Actu's Future Water Options project estimated this further 25% reduction to little more than half of 1992 per capita consumption would inflict costs on the community of $400 million. Looking at the costs in more detail, in addition to that, it seems that at least 16,000 trees have been lost due to lack of water in the last few years. If you do a back-of-the-envelope calculation, think if it costs between $1,000 to $2,000 to chop down a dead tree and plant a new one and wait for it to grow, the replacement value of a tree is about $8,000 to $16,000 to the community for each dead tree, private or public. The cost of dead trees could be $300 to $400 million by now on that basis. And let's put a value on the forced labour we all have to do, carting buckets around or standing outside holding hoses while the irrigation systems or sprinklers are turned off and we can't use them. If 80,000 ACT householders had to spend an average of 3 hours extra a week holding hoses or lugging buckets at a reasonable labour value, the time cost in 1 year alone would be 120 roughly in millions. Turning to lawns and gardens, if it would take an average of $2,000 to restore lawns and gardens that have been destroyed or damaged, that implies a cost over 100,000 houses of $200 million. That's before we get to the structural damage of buildings cracking because of highly variable moisture content in the clay soils here. And we don't take into account the losses due to people not being able to play their sports or injuries on very hard surfaces and sports grounds. All up, it seems a fair estimate the socio-economic costs, which may exceed $1 billion to the people of Canberra. That may have already been inflicted upon us, and you won't find that in any official document. The truly horrifying thing is that these costs may become perpetual if chronic water supply failure continues to be tolerated. ACTU itself put a very low figure on the drought's costs of $71 million, but even this, what I consider an underestimate, if repeated on a regular basis, would represent the equivalent of a one-off loss of $800 to $900 million. So the obvious question to an economist is, if the community is having these costs inflicted upon it, what are the options to get rid of these costs? And what's the benefit of doing something? Well, before we do that, an economist also says, well, why waste money if you don't have to? Do we have enough storage? Well, that is an interesting question which other speakers will talk about. But the answer is yes, we do have enough storage if we don't empty the existing dams with very large and unnecessary environmental flow releases. The answer is no, if we do want to maintain these very large environmental flow releases. The ACT government has published figures, which you'll see in the paper, of the environmental flow releases. But let me tell you, since 2000, when the dams were last full, at the end of 2000, the total amount let out of the dams has been 166 gigalitres. That is 2.5 years worth of Canberra and Queanbeyan's water let out through years which were mostly drought. In 2005, ACTU released 14.47 gigalitres, which was even above the required environmental flow release of 8 gigalitres. In 2006, the worst drought year on record, they released 15.7 gigalitres when they were only required to release 8.3 gigalitres. Now let's just stop and think. We have been told in the press that the dams were 67% full in late 2005 when the drought was declared over. in December 2005, normal environmental releases were resumed, and they continued right throughout till November 2006 during the worst drought year on record. And I think that was only after a letter appeared in the Canberra Times pointing out the amount of water flowing over Bendora Dam was sufficient to supply 29,000 households on an annual basis. So there it is, an ACTU's own report for 2005-2006. ACTU commenced releasing flows in December 2005 in accordance with the ACT government's new environmental flow guidelines. This involved reverting back to normal release requirements following 3 years of sustained dry weather that had led to an improved production of flows. So we have two remarkable facts here. First, in 2005 and 2006, environmental releases were even above requirements. And another remarkable fact is that even on ACTU's own graphs, enough water was coming into the dams to cover 60 gigalitres a year of usage. That is pretty much Canberra and Queanbeyan's normal usage. We had enough water coming into the dams right throughout the years of drought, even when we were not exploiting all of Canberra's catchments to maintain normal usage. Only in 2006 did the flows drop way down to 22 gigalitres. So let's do a bit of maths. You can see it all in the paper, but basically, if the dams dropped from 67% full in late 2005 to 31% 18 months later, as we're told, that means about 75 gigalitres has gone out of the dams. Well, who got the water? Inflows were 22. If we use 62, it means we took 40 out of the dams. Extrapolate over 18 months, that means we should have accounted for about 60 gigalitres. But 75 has gone. Well, they've now admitted it, as I said. 15 gigalitres was tipped out of the dams in the worst drought year in the ACT's history. That is 3 months' worth of water. We use about 5 gigalitres a month. Now, I don't know what you think, but I'm a bit puzzled about a water authority in the middle of a drought, a very severe one, with an unexpectedly out off the map drop in water flows, which it professes to be worried about. I'm very surprised at such a large amount of water being let out. And let's put it, reverting to the economist's hat, at $3.12 per kilolitre, which is what the regulator, ICRC, and the ACT government think is the value of water. I think it's far too high. But on their figures, that 15 gigalitres let out in 2006 was worth $47 million. Not a bad thing to do, letting out $47 million worth of water downriver in the middle of a drought. If we value the full 166 gigalitres let out since 2000 when the dams were last full, the ACT government, on its own valuation, has given away or sent down the river free of charge $500 million worth of water. And now the prices have gone up to compensate them. Because we didn't get to use or pay for the water. So one might say that the water was not really scarce at all, but has been made scarce by the actions of the ACT government. Now, many Canberra and Queanbeyan water users would not wish to harm rice growers or other people downstream, but there does seem little economic reason why they could not have used more of those 166 gigalitres first before it was sent on its happy way downstream to other towns and to Adelaide. It's a very strange concept of economics that says that if I throw away the stock in my shop, that consumers should pay me more for the stock I've kept for sale.